Significant developments tonight on another story out of Minneapolis we've been following closely. Police have arrested Amir Locke's 17-year-old cousin on suspicion of second-degree murder. Officers were serving a no-knock warrant in connection to that murder when they shot and killed Amir. Now there are repeated calls to ban the use of no-knock warrants in the city. BNC's Janine Donaldson has more.
No-knock warrants are dangerous and put both residents and officers at high risk for injury and death.
Between 2010 to 2016, at least 94 people were killed in the United States as a result of no-knock warrants. They're dangerous for residents and for the police. Of those 94 folks, 13 of them were police officers.
22-year-old Amir Locke was shot and killed by Minneapolis police last week during the execution of a no-knock search warrant. They were assisting St. Paul police in a homicide investigation.
This is an epic failure of policy, and that failed policy killed Amir Locke just as surely as the bullets that pierced his body.
In 2020, Minneapolis police homicide clearance rate was 37%. In St. Paul, it was 91%. Neither city has had an officer killed by violence in 17 years.
And so we're looking at these two cities, one that uses no-knock warrants, one that doesn't, and we're not seeing any difference in officer safety, and we're also not seeing that no-knock warrants create a higher clearance rate or solve more crimes.
As of November 2020, Minneapolis averaged about 139 no-knock warrants per year. In the next 10 months following the policy change, the city made 90 requests. An analysis by the Star Tribune revealed last month police made at least 13 requests.
In November 2020, Mayor Frey announced a new policy regulating Minneapolis Police Department's use of no-knock warrants. Many people have referred to this as a ban on no-knock warrants.
But it wasn't.
We have Oregon, Florida, and Virginia. We have citywide bans such as Louisville, San Antonio, Memphis. And then we also have cities like St. Paul who haven't created an affirmative ban, but they also haven't executed a no-knock warrant since 2016.
Breonna's death prompted many promises for reform, but only 3 states and 12 cities have completely banned no-knock warrants.
Sarah Murtada, law student at the University of St. Thomas Law School, says there are 5 key pieces to an effective ban on no-knock warrants. Carry out warrants during the day, require officers to knock before entering, announce their presence clearly and repeatedly, wait at least 30 seconds before entering, and report data monthly to ensure transparency.
Right now, we don't know how many cases are like Amir Locke. We don't know how many people are impacted or even killed by no-knock warrants because there's no transparency.
Bans on no-knock warrants don't affect active hostage situations or hot pursuits. In Charlotte, I'm Janine Donaldson for BNC.
Still with me is criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona. All right, so I hate that we're talking about yet another senseless killing of a young black man because of another useless no-knock warrant. Bernarda, I just want to get your general thoughts of what happened to Amir.
Well, I'm upset about what happened to Amir because here you have another innocent man being killed at the hands of police. And let's be real, Amir Locke, he was in lawful possession of that firearm. So what did Amir Locke did wrong? Absolutely nothing. And that's the problem that we have here, that this possibly could have been prevented had a no-knock warrant been issued in this case, especially when we're taking into account what was the probable cause for them to get a warrant and what was the affidavit, listing the affidavit for the necessity for such a no-knock warrant.
Listen, speaking of the outrage there that is growing, there's a number of people calling for the officers involved to be fired and for the mayor and interim police chief to resign, should they?
So first off, of course, there's always a rush to judgment when we're talking about someone needs to be fired. Someone has to take the hit, as we will say, for what actually happened, to show the community that there are repercussions for what happened. In terms of what needs to happen is that there has to be a clear look. Look into the system, look into the instructions, look into the tactical training of these officers and what actually went wrong. Could have this been prevented and was it a necessity? So, in terms of firing anyone at this point, I think it's still early. It's right that the officer has been placed, Hanneman, on administrative leave until it's decided what actually happened on this day.
You know, the mayor had put a moratorium, or has a moratorium, on the use of no-knock warrants, with the exception of a few circumstances. But Bernarda, in November of 2020, Minneapolis had announced that it was updating its policy on no-knock warrants, and it was a move that the mayor's campaign touted as a ban of no-knocks, but it didn't actually ban them. Now we're here talking about how it's taking yet another black life. And so folks don't believe him or the rhetoric, and understandably so.
Exactly. I'm always cautious when people or different cities say, oh, we banned no-knock warrants. I find it hard to believe that a city or a state will completely ban no-knock warrants. Because I'm not saying that it should be banned completely, but I think it should be the unique circumstance as opposed to the norm when no-knock warrants are being issued. Because there are instances where there should be a no-knock warrant, and that's, for example, during a hostage situation, you don't want to give those people a heads up that you're coming in. So my thing, we can tell you and myself, Yodit, about when someone's talking through one side of their mouth because we have that prosecutorial and defense experience, so we could read it between the lines.
So we know that the search warrants weren't for Amir, and now we hear that police have arrested his 17-year-old cousin, charging him with suspicion of second-degree murder. What effect will this have on the investigation into Amir's death moving forward?
So into the investigation of Amir's death, again, it's all going to focus on what was the information that the officer or the detective presented to a judge or to his superior in order to get this warrant signed off. We need to find out whether it was a legit warrant to begin with. So, for example, if we compare it to the case of Breonna Taylor, remember that warrant, it wasn't that a judge or a prosecutor wrote that warrant or approved that warrant, but rather they had stale information, wrong information of who they were looking for, hadn't been in that house in over months. So stuff like this made that warrant to be so negligent in its writing and also in the executing of that warrant. In terms of this being the cousin, it doesn't change what happened inside of that house, because regardless, when the officers went into the house, they didn't know that that was Amir Locke. They didn't know that that was the person they were looking for. All they saw in their minds was that it was an African-American male with a gun.
Bernarda, Minnesota's Attorney General Keith Ellison, who led the successful prosecutions of both Derek Chauvin and Kim Potter, as you know, will be looking into the shooting. Given what we know so far, do you think we'll see charges brought against any of these officers involved?
I do not see charges being brought. If anything, it's possible that Attorney General Keith Ellison may present this case to a grand jury, but I just don't see charges to the extent that this case will go to trial, that they'll be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it wasn't reasonable for this officer to fear of imminent death or serious bodily injury.
Which is always the difficulty in proving. All right, Bernarda Villalona, thank you so much for your time and expertise. I appreciate you.